What's up, banana bunch? Bunch?
Welcome to the Jungle Gyms podcast. What's up, Banana Bunch? You know what time it is? It's time for another episode of the Jungle Gyms podcast. I'm your host, Mark. Welcome to the show. If you're listening to the audio-only version of the show, I appreciate your support. But of course, if you want to get a little more personally involved, join us over on YouTube. I'm going to keep saying this until I see the subscriber count there get to where I want it to be. And it's going great. I know a lot of you have joined me over there. And if you don't know this, what I've been trying to do lately is, in addition to the podcast itself, right, I'm trying to keep more of the podcast to the, I know a lot of you prefer listening to the audio-only version, as you've told me, but I do like releasing it on both platforms, as I think it should be everywhere and easily consumed. But I have been trying to make also some shorter form content just for YouTube. So even if you don't want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, it would make me just so happy if you join me on YouTube and check some of that stuff out. Right now, we have the #1 review of Pepsi's new soda, Starry. So if you're curious in the world of soda, you can check that out. It did really well. We recently did a piece on international sauces, dipping sauces, and things of that nature. That was a ton of fun. And that's the kind of content I want to drive there. And then, of course, I'll be doing the podcast so we can do our deep dives. Not much different than lately. And you know what? Since I'm telling you all to watch this on YouTube, you might notice I'm not in my usual garb today. And that's because I'm about to hit the road this week. Like literally in the next few hours after taping this, I'm headed down to Orlando, Florida to check out the Podfest Expo, a huge convention on podcasting that goes on here in the United States. And I'm really excited because I think that should be able to give me some great tips, tools, other T-words to help grow the show and make a better show for all of you and really for me. Ultimately, this is about me continuing to receive a paycheck, so help me out. Hit those subscribe buttons, and if you haven't yet, I could really use some more reviews on Apple Podcasts. We've gotten a couple in recently. Shout out to Phil, Cincy Phil at that. And also, I want to give another quick shout out to Megan, who I met at the OTR Stillhouse the other night, that recognized me from the show. Very cool. And I was in normal street clothes like this, so it was even better. You know, I mean, I do tend to dress kind of loud anyway, but that made my day. Thank you both so much for that. And I would love to shout all of you out. Another thing before I dive into the show notes for today, please give us a call at 513-674-6855. I'm compiling all of our anonymous phone, what are they called? Voicemails that I've been getting from audience members and guests and all kinds of fun stuff like that because I want to do that as a regular segment on the show. So I'm just compiling them. Thank you to those of you who've already called in and left some insane voicemails for me to sift through. I appreciate it. Just let the demons out. I'm ready for it. So this is kind of a trend this month. You know, last week we talked with Greg Brewer and Larry O'Brien, where they opened my mind to the world of wine. And another beverage that I've always had a little bit of anxiety about, and I mentioned with Greg in passing, is coffee. So when I had the opportunity to team up with Boston Stoker, one of the many coffee brands that we carry here at Jungle Gyms, I was on board, especially when they were like, hey, we want to roast coffee beans in your office. And we're going to do the whole process. We're going to walk you through this all, and we're going to explain the world of coffee to you through this. I jumped at the opportunity because, look, I want to learn about it. I'd like to feel less uncomfortable in front of the 15-year-old baristas that are like, an Americano is espresso with water, you old idiot. So hopefully I can stave off some of the anxiety for you two out there. So, like I said, today I'm joined by Boston Stoker Coffee to talk through that. And we've got a lot of fun stuff. We're going to go through the whole process from picking the bean to you name it. I don't want to bury the lead too much, but you definitely get to see us like pour over coffee, roasting them inside the WJJI studio. It was amazing. It smells even better than I think we say it does in the interview. So on that, enjoy the segment. I'll see you on the other side. I am here today with Anna from Boston Stoker. I'm sitting here with a fresh, let me get the label out, and I know what I'm doing, fresh cup of coffee that we just roasted and brewed here in-house. It's delicious.
Thank you, Mark.
So since I am somewhat new to the world of coffee, let's start, before we go through all the processes and the history of Boston Stoker and everything, what kind of thing should I be looking for? This is your house blend that we're tasting, right?
This is our house blend. We call it Classic 83.
Okay.
It's really reminiscent of what we were trying to do in the 80s, what we were really going for.
Yeah.
A nice citrus coffee with some chocolate notes. This falls in the category of our balanced coffees.
Okay. And what kind of a roast would this be considered? Is this like a light roast, a medium roast, dark roast? Where are we on that?
This is a full city roast.
Okay. Cool. What does that mean? I've never heard that expression.
Yeah, I hope it's a full city roast. Something, somewhere in that area. It's a light roast.
Okay.
Maybe slightly beyond real light.
But somewhere in there. Something you said to me before we started I thought was really interesting because, again, like I said, I'm always the idiot hoping to learn through these processes. And I feel like I've always been a dark roast person. But what I thought was fascinating is right before we tried this, you were noting that you would maybe get a little more delicate access to other flavors and things of that nature. And so in tasting this, as somebody who doesn't usually drink a light roast, I now totally know what you mean in that I feel like I could distinguish this one out of a line. If I had to pick it out of a lineup, like I think I could actually. If
you were to cup it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cupping is the method for testing coffee, tasting coffee, comparing coffee, looking for flaws. It's the way it's done the world over.
So what's that process look like as far as when you say cupping? It looks like
grinding the same amount of coffee into little cups, filling with water, just pouring the water right on top of the coffee and letting it sit for a very specific amount of time.
Okay.
And then the cuppers will do what's called, before that, they're smelling the grounds and trying to pick up on notes and attributes and flaws. They'll break the crust. So that coffee forms a kind of a crust with the grounds floating to the top.
Okay.
And they'll take a spoon, a silver spoon specifically, pull that crust away, smell it, give it some more time, take the crust away, and then sip. And not just sip, it's a slurp. It's
interesting.
It's throwing the coffee back to the entirety of your mouth so that every part of your mouth, your tongue, and you're getting the aroma through your nose.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. So the crust, I mean, and for those of you, I'm assuming that's very similar to like when I first start the French press, right? Like you get the effectively the caked layer.
It's exactly what it looks like.
Okay,
a nice fresh coffee. It's going to bubble up and off gas. And
oh, cool. And off gas, that was another term. I know we talked about this off air, but what does off gassing mean in this? Just regard?
Where the coffee is fresh coffee will off gas. It's releasing carbon dioxide.
Oh, okay, and effectively giving some of the smell to the room. I'm assuming.
Right.
Too.
All the compounds. There's over 800 compounds in
That's
coffee.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's
that's so crazy
that we know of.
And this, I mean, I'm definitely picking up the chocolate notes. And once you mentioned the citrus too, now that I'm looking for that sort of citrusy, it's almost like a tang, if you will.
You should taste that kind of at the beginning.
Yeah, it's like
of the cup. When
that makes
you drink
sense.
That.
Yeah, I can see it. It's like on the tip, almost like on the tip of my tongue.
It's a brighter coffee.
Yeah, I like that too. And did I just turn into a light roast fan? Did you just do that to me today?
Thank you. You're welcome. I mean,
really. And, look, I know I said this a bunch off air too, but I always love these opportunities because to me, it's just, I'm fascinated by it. I'm a relative recent adopter of drinking coffee regularly. So it's, and I want to be one of those people. And in turn, I'd love to help the audience become one of those people too, that come out and go, hey, now I know about coffee. You can really learn, I assume for a lot of people, maybe they drank the same thing forever. Maybe they're interested in trying a change, right? And seeing what they, because right before this, I was like, oh, I think I'm a dark roast person, but I still don't know if I am, right?
Yeah.
Until you try. So thank you for that. I appreciate you providing that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Boston Stoker. How did they start? Like, how did you get into Jungle Gyms? All that kind of fun stuff.
Okay, so Boston Stoker started in 1973 in Dayton, Ohio. Don and Sally Dean started that business, and it was actually a cigar, pipe, and loose tobacco store.
That's actually kind of funny.
So Don and Sally started to brew coffee to keep their customers good coffee, fine coffee, to go with the fine cigars and tobacco in the store. He got a roaster, got a little Probat roaster, and started parked it at the front of the store, and just kind of, people wanted to start buying the beans then.
Right.
That was toward the end of the 70s, and it's kind of when Starbucks kind of really was getting very popular,
right.
And people were becoming aware of kind of what's called second wave coffee.
Okay.
There's 5 waves of coffee, but
do you know what those waves are?
Kind of, sort of. The first wave was, just kind of the origins of coffee, the beginning of coffee, and then canning coffee, Folgers coffee, instant coffee. Second wave was kind of hanging out in coffee shops, specialty drinks, espresso machines, and where that business kind of took off. Third wave coffee is where we're actually starting to pay a little more attention to sourcing coffee, the farmers, where it comes from, little bit of the science of coffee. It's kind of where some of the pretentiousness of coffee started to come about. Sure. And hopefully that's going away with fourth.
Right. The pretend. Yeah.
We're talking about the terroir and sustainable farming methods, supporting the farmers and people that are, where we get our coffee from. Transparency.
Yeah. And I think
how it's grown.
I think that's been a really interesting shift in just all food, drink world. I think everybody's really, really interested in that now, as well we should. And I got to give a shout out to the Jungle Gyms podcast audience who you heard terroir. You've learned that word already when we talked about Italian wines. And if you haven't, maybe it's the time to go back and listen to that episode. But the short answer is effectively just growing conditions, right? It's like the soil type, altitude. Soil, temperature.
The amount of rain, temperature, the environment.
It's crazy. Yeah, which is, go ahead.
And even a slight difference in an area, one area can make a world of difference in the final cup.
It makes sense too. I mean, because we're growing product, so it's like wherever it comes, all of those things are going to factor into it. Well, I guess that leads me into this. Where are the places that Boston Stoker grows theirs?
Well, we get our coffee. Well, I'll go back to a little bit of the history and how we started with direct trade, because we've been doing direct trade for a long time.
Awesome.
And how that came about, it's a fun story. Someone named Bill McAlpin, he's a Texas native, but he grew up in Costa Rica. His dad was a farmer. And his dad got rid of the farm in the 70s because of kind of the political atmosphere. And Bill went back and bought parts of that farm and started growing coffee again, and then shipped it to the U.S. And was driving around with a U-Haul trailer. And Don Dean and Sally Dean bought coffee from Bill. So that was the beginning of us having a very close direct trade relationship with a fantastic farm. That's a coffee that's hand sorted.
It's amazing. Now, so you mentioned direct trade. Is that, I know I always hear the expression fair trade as well. Are those related at all, or?
Well, you want things to be fair. They're kind of, I think fair trade, and I don't know the specifics.
Sure.
I wouldn't,
and that's okay.
I wouldn't want to say that fair trade's not a good thing, because obviously it is. Right. Direct trade, I can give you an example of benefit of direct trade. When we get to know farmers very personally, we bring them over here, we go there, we can help them put in better infrastructure so that they can grow better coffee. Better coffee scores better. Coffee's graded just like wine is. Specialty coffee is anything over 80. We don't bring in anything that doesn't score 85 or higher. And, then that determines the price, and that farmer benefits from the actual price of growing a better coffee.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, from there, La Manita, so our relationship with La Manita went on. They've gone and set up processing centers in Colombia, where we get this coffee now. This is a coffee that is in the kind of close to Jardín in Antioquia, a little village town called Antioquia. Very clean. People go out and sweep the streets every day and take great pride. La Manita helped set that area up, and so it's kind of a co-op. The local farmers bring their coffee in, and
amazing. And so they're out there like hand picking these effectively, right? Is that crazy to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, and it depends on the region. Coffees from Brazil are strip picked. It's a flatter area. It's not as high in altitude. Places that are mountainous, great tasting coffees grow at high altitudes.
Sure.
So you really can't strip pick that anyways. You've got people with baskets strapped to their waist walking up and down the side of a mountain, and a good coffee picker will pick about 100 to 200 pounds of coffee a day.
I can't even imagine what that looks like.
I know. And they only pick the ripest coffee cherries. Coffee's a fruit. It's called a cherry. And they will go back over that tree maybe once every 10 days and continue to take the ripest cherries.
So in saying
very
that,
labor intensive.
I can imagine. Well, and now that I'm hearing the cherry part too, you said it's a fruit. So like the actual beans that we're getting, is that like inside the fruit?
Yeah, it's technically a stone fruit.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is the kind of stuff you can learn on the show, folks.
And then the pickers will go and they will take their haul to the side of the road. Trucks drive by up and down these mountainous roads. They weigh it right there on the side of the road and pay them on the spot for the amount of coffee, and only if it's good coffee. This is most good coffees.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And so when we first start, maybe is this a good segue into the roasting process, perhaps?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Sure,
okay. Well, because I'm assuming when they pick it.
I mean, there's so much more that happens between then and.
Oh, well, yeah, no, don't let me stop.
What I wanted to say, you talked about, people talk about how expensive specialty grade coffee is.
Yeah.
If you know what it goes through to get here, it blows my mind that we get it as cheap as we do. One coffee tree, 1 pound of coffee a year. Maybe another growing season. And the labor intensiveness that goes through. So, once you're the picker is paid, that coffee goes to a wet mill, and it's either washed completely, the pulp of the cherry is washed away, or not, depending on the drying process. But if it gets put into fermentation tanks. It'll go down little conveyor belts and streams, and so from that process they kind of are getting rid of any not so great cherries that made its way in, and sorted by size, fermented depending on the spot. You've got someone that decides that evening. I've seen this. I've been to La Manita, and this is one part of the process that amazed me. They're bringing it out in the middle of the night, and you've got guys that are maybe 16 years old, these young guys, and you can tell they just take such great pride in being out here at night and going through this milling process. And someone decides, based on the temperature that day, the humidity level, everything, how long that coffee's going to sit in the fermentation.
That's amazing.
Tank.
I don't think I even realized that there was a fermentation process.
Yeah.
That's amazing. See, this is exactly why I love these moments on the show, because I'm just like, oh, cool. Not only is everyone else going to learn, I will sit here and go, I'm just shocked the entire time.
Well, that's why I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it too, because like I said, the fact that you get 1 pound of coffee from one tree a year, maybe a little more, it just, and what it goes through, it's amazing.
And now I'm almost surprised at how, hearing this and thinking about how much specialized labor and all these extra processes it goes through. Now there's that part of me that's like, is it being priced high enough even, right? I mean, as silly as that might sound, but no, it's one of my biggest takeaways I've had in the year I've been doing the show so far is that for all these specialty items, there's so much work that goes into it. Yeah. We have the little slogan on the show of breaking the food chain. And I think this is so interesting because to me, knowing that stuff really puts it all in perspective when you think that like, there's literally some person out there walking up the side of a mountain to grab little fruits. And then of those fruits, how many of them make it through? And all of these little steps along the way to getting what we, for many of us, we kind of take for granted, right? Yeah. We're just like, oh, it's hot coffee. It's whatever. Just drink it,
Once it gets dried, or what the drying process looks like, you've got to hull the coffee, remove the that silver skin, that chaff from the coffee, and decrease the moisture content without it turning bad.
Right.
There are a couple of ways that can be dried in a drum, kind of a drum dryer, or a lot of times it will just be laid out on a dry patio.
Okay.
And then someone walks up and down the patio with a rake and constantly turns that coffee.
Oh, Interesting. Is that, I remember thinking of this coffee shop when I grew up, and I remember them having a drum would be the way I would visually describe it, and I could be wrong on this, but it was almost like you could see all the beans in there, and then there was almost like like a turbine that just constantly rotated them. And now I'm thinking, I'm like, was that the roaster, or was that maybe drying beans? I would assume the latter, maybe. Does that sound? Am I crazy for asking that?
The one I saw at La Manita looked like a giant dryer. It was just a big rotating drum and an air dryer, and it just kept it moving and drying.
That's so cool. Yeah, just keep it fresh, and nice. I love it.
But like I said, a lot of places too just patio dry it. There's a couple different ways to dry coffee to bring about more sweetness, and that's been very popular since maybe the 90s, and still yet. I don't know if you've ever heard the term natural coffees, natural processed coffees, but it's basically where that fruit is left on the bean as it dries.
Oh, interesting.
So a honey washed would be one where there's just a little bit of fruit left on the bean as it dries.
Interesting.
Or it can mean that coffee is left on the tree as it dries. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
And so that will allow it to end up a sweeter roast long term?
Sweeter, a little more acidic or brightness, depending on the coffee in the area. It's
interesting.
Yeah, they can be really incredibly sweet. Very popular coffee, Ethiopian Arty. You'll find that in a lot of roasters roast that coffee, and what we're doing results in a very nutty but strawberry chocolate. You open that bag of beans and it smells like a chocolate covered strawberry.
Wow, I was not expecting that to be the description. That's amazing.
Yeah. I'll bring sometime.
I would love that. Okay. Yeah, next time we get a demo, I'll come sneak back there for you. So then what would be the next step post drying? Where do we go after that?
Let's see. In the case of La Manita, once it's dried, it's hand sorted. Wow. So there's just all these, and they use women have this job, I guess, because they tend to have more better fine motor control and hand-eye coordination. I don't know, more patience. I don't know, but they literally lay the coffee beans out on a table and hand sort through and pick out any flawed beans that may have made their way
no kidding
into that batch of coffee, because only I think it's about 20% of the coffee that's produced at La Manita is their specialty grade La Manita coffee, what we buy. And from there they still continue to take coffee from those plants, and they'll just be a lower grade coffee. What's sad is what ends up happening is that last level of quality of coffee is usually what they drink, what
that's
farmers
a bummer.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's starting to change.
That's good.
That is really starting to change. I think Fourth Wave is bringing about more coffee shops and farmers and coffee growers actually getting into that to making coffee and
getting to
enjoying a specialty. Yeah,
exactly. It's like the fruits of your labor. You should definitely advance on that. Yeah. Amazing.
It's kind of like people that I watched a video once of chocolate. Some guys that had been harvesting cocoa beans forever, and someone brought them a chocolate bar from the U.S. and they all sat down. It was the first time in years and years that they actually ate the chocolate candy.
Oh, I love when you get to see those moments too. I mean, I think, and that's, to me, that's one of those part of the transparency now, right? I loved the idea now that maybe we just didn't even know, but like, I'm loving that everybody's getting access to the good stuff.
Yeah.
There's always a human interest angle on the show for me. I'm just like, oh, cool. We're taking care of people too. I love this, because they should get a chance to enjoy it. And I imagine, it's funny when you were talking about this process, I kept thinking how similar it sounds to the chocolate making process as far as like processing the beans and all of those things. Very interesting.
And the need for transparency and knowing where it comes from and how it was grown and who it's growing, who,
right, where it's coming from.
Who it's benefiting.
Yeah, amazing.
One of our direct trade farmers was here maybe about half a year ago. Wilmer Peraza. It is a coffee that is at Jungle Gyms. It's on the shelf because I really wanted to promote that coffee and sell his coffee. He's using a varietal that's a little different than maybe some other, but it's a Honduran hybrid coffee that resists rust, coffee rust. It's you know, and I guess in Honduras they limit the varietals that the farmers can grow because of that. They don't want to devastate you know.
Yeah. When you say coffee rust, what does that even mean?
You know, I don't know what coffee rust is. It's probably a virus or some kind of...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something that attacks those plants and can be really devastating.
Ugh, awful. No thanks.
And, so Wilmer came over here a while back ago, and he said a couple of things that I thought was pretty interesting. He actually, our director told me that he was wanting to smuggle different varieties into, but he said to us, I kind of want to look into this a little bit more. I thought it was interesting, but he said that sometimes Guatemalan coffees, finer Guatemalan coffees, are actually really good Honduran coffees that were taken by the bandits.
Really?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me that in 2022.
Maybe next time we talk, I'll have uncovered a little more of that story to find out, because I still really want to know what he meant by that.
That's incredible. Well, it's funny when you hear these kinds of things that it's 2022 and we're still effectively dealing with literal pirates.
Yeah.
You know, it's just in a slightly different setting.
I don't know if bandit is another word for cartel.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah.
We're on the radar now.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Drink it while the getting's good, Anna.
But Wilmer was over here with his wife and young child, and we had a throwdown at one of our coffee shops trying to raise money for computers for his school, because he's also a junior high math teacher.
Incredible.
And they need computers.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, I'm happy to support, too.
So every time you buy Honduran coffee from Boston Stoker, we donate $1 for a 12-ounce bag, $10 for any 5-pound bag that we sell.
That's incredible. Very cool. Yeah, see, again, there's that human interest angle just sneaking on in on us. Amazing. What's the next step in the process? Where do we go? So we've got the beans now, right?
We've got the dried beans.
Yeah. We've been patio drying them.
We've been either patio drying them, where they get bagged up in burlap sacks after they've been, dried to the point where I think at that point there's 11% moisture left is what I read. It's bagged and put out on barges that either make it here on time or not.
Sure.
We will choose coffees. Farmers or coffee growers will send sample coffee. Oh. So it'll be sample roasted, and that'll kind of help determine the price, however it's graded.
Interesting. And I was going to ask about the sample roasting in that regard, because I figured they'd want you to control that, not the other way around. But I guess they can kind of maybe quality control a little bit, at least.
Yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on where it goes from there.
Sure.
I need to know more about that.
No, that's okay.
Of it, how that's actually traded. Bought.
And when they usually come over, like the beans, I mean, so, I would assume for a lot of people, they just assume they come out, like, you get a bag of whole bean coffee, it's already brownish or black, depending on what you're getting. But the true fresh bean is like a greenish yellow color, right?
Very green. It's a light green, but definitely green, very dense and heavy. In fact, when we roasted and we got to that first crack point, the bean can expand almost, in some cases, double in size by that point. That's
really?
How much moisture has been pulled out of that.
Oh, interesting. Well, and so I guess while we're talking about this, you'll see some clips. If you're watching the YouTube version of the show, that is, you can see some clips we'll put in here throughout this of the roasting process, as well as the brewing and all that good stuff.
Right before we set off the smoke alarm.
Yeah, that was the whole reason we wanted to do this. We're like, oh no, but that was a cool process to watch, because I wasn't sure what to expect. I assumed it would be like a smoky, intense process, but it really wasn't. I mean, it was this hypnotizing. You're watching, and I took some good time lapse footage, so you'll see that at some point, if not right now as I'm talking. But it was really hypnotic to watch that, as you're just seeing the beans undulating in here ad nauseum. And I know Lucky and I were talking with you before, and we were like, is this not a lengthy process? But it was, not even 10 minutes, I think, to get from...
It didn't even go 10 minutes before it got to the temperature where it was at first crack.
Yeah, so what's that roasting process like effectively? I mean, we're really just taking these raw beans and introducing heat.
These very dense green beans. and introducing heat. You know, as the heat's applied either by an air roaster or, you know, some people actually roast their coffee on a hot plate or like a skillet. There's people can use popcorn poppers. We've got a couple different roasters at Boston Stoker. We have one that can roast. We roast a full bag. A bag that you get from Origin is about 150 pounds. Okay. And so this roaster can do that in about 15 minutes. It's can be digitally controlled. It's programmed to roast that much coffee. And we'll do some of our blends, you know, maybe the blend that we're flavoring when we want to do a large batch of coffee. We've got a little German roaster called the Gotthard. And it will roast about 45 pounds in the same amount of time, maybe 15 minutes. But there's a lot more control. It's more of an artisan roasting technique. You've got the roaster that just has to stay really focused on that as that coffee is roasting. And they've got this little, I don't know, it's a scoop that goes in and out of the roaster. It's called a trier. And as they go toward the end of the roast, they just constantly pulling that out and grabbing a bean and popping it in their mouth, smelling it, looking at it, seeing where it's at, and just paying complete attention to where they're at. And with that particular roaster, they can adjust the amount of gas and raise the heat. You know, if they start to see little burn marks on the bean, then they know that they're burning the outside of the bean, so they can take down. And then they can manipulate the final profile of the coffee with you know, how fast they bring the heat up, and it's just, there's so much to it. Yeah, you know?
I'm so impressed. And watching you doing this, I mean, that was still fun because you were doing the same thing, or you were watching.
I wasn't controlling anything.
But it's still an interesting thing to watch the attention to detail. And then you told me about the first crack, which is the way I would describe it. It's like watching, I mean, again, I hate to keep likening it to other processes, but it's like,
it's
you know.
It's a result of the Maillard
reaction, right?
Reaction, yeah.
The
browning, the sucrose being released and bringing out the sweetness of foods, kind of like bread. That's why it tastes like,
that makes
smells
sense.
like toast.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that first crack is almost like popcorn.
That's what I was going to say. It reminded me of watching popcorn in that regard. We're like, all right, we heard the first one. Now we're going to watch. And at that point, you were like, hey, we have a minute and a half or less before
90
this.
seconds. 90 seconds. What we determined is the best time on that particular roaster to take the gas off and let that coffee start cooling. Because, you know, in the roasters, in our roasters at the warehouse, any roaster, a big roaster like that, they drop the coffee the minute it hits that temperature where they want it. They pull this lever and all this coffee comes, you know, out, and then it's agitated, and there's actually air that's applied or brought into the cooling process to immediately stop that cooking process.
Oh, that's interesting too. Huh. Does that, do you think that would affect the flavor pretty dramatically versus like in this case where it was just like we just shut it down?
In a case of a few degrees. Okay. It really can.
That's wild to me. Yeah. Well, and I guess we'll talk about this when we're actually in the brewing part too, but same kind of thing there too, it seems like. I love finding out that I'm just doing things wrong my whole life, and that it's interesting to me that a little bit of specificity in a few areas, right, in this case, and temperature, things of that nature, can pretty dramatically affect the quality and ultimately the taste of the product. It's wild. Yeah. It was cool. I've never watched it roast in front of me like that before, you know. Always one of those things that casually walk in if somebody was roasting it somewhere. I'm like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you're bringing that coffee in the roast level, you know, is where you're finding acids and compounds that are good or bad. You know, we were talking about a dark roast. With a dark roast, you're starting to kind of mask some of the flavors. The acids will start to degrade. Some of those are good, some of those are bad.
Interesting.
A lot of times dark roast coffee is not bad. A lot of people love it. Yeah. It can be very good. Sometimes it's used to mask flaws in coffee.
Interesting. And that makes sense. I mean, really, it's one of those things where, just crank up the temp a little bit and hopefully, you know, But I guess there is that subjective angle to it too, where some people just like the way that tastes.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I love it.
No, it can be very complimentary.
But it is fun now that I know what to taste for, that I think it will change my drinking habits, because I'm very interested in that. And I would assume a lot of you are too, very interested in those nuances. And that's, I don't know, I want to be an expert in the things I enjoy. Yeah. And I'd like to at least, you know, because even if at the end of this, I'm like, no, I still prefer dark roast, whatever. But I love knowing that there are things that you can reach out for. And again, just in tasting this that we made today, there were so many notes and flavors I'm just not used to experiencing when I get a cup of coffee. And that could be things from, you know, the fact that we have so many major, how should I say, like just the chain coffee places that may not have the time or the capability.
It's just not the business model.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so no shade or anything like that.
Yeah,
but,
no.
You know, but it's like if you're doing X amount of, you know, a lot of customers all the time, I'm sure some corners have to unfortunately be cut in certain regards, whereas today we're sitting here, you're roasting, I forget what you told me, it was like 48 grams exactly of beans that we ground up fresh, which that I think obviously affected the flavor, grinding it fresh.
Absolutely.
You know, and then we did the chemex process.
It's one of the best things you can do to have a good tasting coffee at home is get a grinder.
No kidding.
Your coffee's going to last longer. Once it's ground, it starts to lose some of the flavor.
That makes sense. You know, before we get into the brewing part, I wanted to ask, you mentioned like flavor coffees. Where does the flavor get introduced? Like, is that in the roasting process?
Are you talking about like a hazelnut or a flavored coffee?
Yeah, like, you know, like,
that's added to the roasted bean.
Okay,
so Boston Stoker, we do use a specialty grade coffee that we flavor, but it's you know, it's an alcohol, kind of an oil based coating that's rolled.
So that's, but it is after you've roasted the beans.
After,
okay, and that makes a ton of sense to me. I just wasn't sure if that was part of the roasting process, but that was cool. So then now,
no, but you know, a lot of people get confused when they read coffee notes. So it's like wine notes. You know, they look at a bag or they look at the description of the coffee, and they, you know, they say, "Well, I don't want lemon in my coffee." What, you know, and those are just notes, and it's really fun to find those notes in a coffee.
Yeah. Well, I think you described this today so well too, where you did have that like bright citrusy thing right up front, and then it kind of just transitions into, and of course it tastes like coffee the whole time, but it transitions into this sort of mellow, almost like a rich dark chocolate. That was really the flavor I got at the, I would say you get like 20% the citrus acid bite in the front, and then it was predominantly that like rich dark note.
That's exactly what we're going for. Yeah, I guess I nailed it.
Yeah, I think you really did nail it. So maybe this is a good time to talk about the roasting process, or not the roasting process, excuse me, but the brewing process. So I was fascinated by the way you did this. So again, if you're watching along, you're probably seeing some of this footage as we go. And we went through a lot of steps. So again, you took, was it 48 grams? Is that what you said?
I used 48 grams.
I love that it was everything was really exact. I found that fascinating. But yeah, you took that, you fresh ground it, and then you've got the electric kettle, and we were going into it was a chemex style, right?
Right. I used a chemex brewer.
I love it. And I mean, you told me before, you're like, oh, it's invented by a chemist. A chemist. It looks like
in
something
in the 1940s.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's funny that's a process that's been around so long.
I know.
But I feel like it's only kind of now gaining a lot of like public notoriety, for lack of a better word.
It's a simple way to brew. You're just pouring water over the coffee. Maybe a little labor intensive for some people, but it is a simple, and it just brings a great cup of coffee.
Yeah, it really, I mean, this was really refreshing. Yeah. And so what I thought was so fascinating is not just the specificity on like the amount of beans that we were using to grind, but then you also had the kettle. You know, most people, I would assume, and I'm definitely most people, I would use, I would just boil, and I usually do a French press at home. So for me, it's always like, all right, get the grounds in the press, and then I'm boiling water and then pouring the water in. And now knowing that we use just under boiling temp, right? So boiling water, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, but you took it to 205 Fahrenheit. And there's a bit of method to the madness, right?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you can take it to that level. It's not really necessary.
Yeah.
When you make a French press, I mean, once you pull that water off the boil, it's
going to start dropping.
It really starts dropping. So there, that's not a bad way to go. And for a while, I'm not going to lie, I've been setting my temperature at 202 degrees when I do pour overs.
A little more delicate.
And then I was reading our website, and I said, oh, they're suggesting 205. So I think I'll go to 205.
Yeah.
And one could take the time to sit and make it both ways and see if they could find the difference in it. And it probably can. I mean, you can take it to that level where with one coffee, you want to go with this temperature, and this coffee, you go with another. It's not going to make that much of a difference to the average person.
But I feel like in this situation where I'm like aggressively trying to taste it.
but taking it to 212 would definitely change.
Interesting.
The temperature.
That might be a fun thing we do next time I have you out here, or when you're at a demo.
Well, we should do a cupping.
That would be fun.
I described a cupping to you.
Yeah, it sounds great.
We could do a cupping here.
Yeah, it'd be very fun. I'd be way into that. Yeah. And what I want to describe the chemex process, because you did say it labor intensive. It definitely is more laborious than just a drip coffee maker, or something that you kind of just do and then you wait.
Pod.
Right. Don't even get me started on those. Oh my gosh. That was one that I was like, that was my gateway into coffee. And very quickly I realized I was doing it wrong. And, I won't get on my soapbox about plastics right now. But the point is, like, knowing this was interesting, and watching you do this I thought was fascinating, because sure, I can imagine, again, if you're doing large scale, making a lot of coffee, it might not be fun. So the way I would describe it to everybody is you've got this, it almost looks like an hourglass with a coffee filter on the top. You've got the grounds in it, and then you were just slowly pouring bits of water on there.
I bloomed it.
Bloom. Thank you. I knew there was a good term.
Yes. So when you make a pour over, either there are other ways to, there are several companies that make good pour over. I think at Jungle Gyms, they've got some nice ones out there.
Yeah.
Hario makes some great ones, and you want to bloom it, though. So what you do is you put your fresh coffee in there, and you pour a little bit of water on it, and you're actually setting the bed up so that it off gases and kind of saturates enough of the coffee. You don't want it to go all the way through the coffee. You're just pre-wetting it so that you've got a nice even bed that you can extract the coffee from.
That's beautiful.
And releasing some of the aromas.
And then you would just effectively keep doing that process kind of over and over again until it started coming through the filter. Is that right?
Yep.
It was beautiful to watch.
Kind of with my nice gooseneck kettle, I'm moving the water to where I think might be I want to make sure I'm not leaving a pocket of coffee that's not being extracted.
Yeah.
I want it evenly extracted.
This was one of those fun things that we joked about this before, where everything in life is surface area exposure. And I really felt like I was like, oh, 7th grade science totally paid off today.
Yeah.
Because seeing that, again, it was one of those things that paying attention to it, I'm sure that the way I've been brewing it, while not bad, could be better. I think that's really my biggest takeaway today.
Well, you said you French press.
Right.
French press is great coffee.
Yeah.
It's different, but it's great coffee. You're getting more of the oil, so you're going to taste a lot. You could take the same coffee and pour it over, or French press it, and you've got the same coffee, but it tastes different, and they're both fantastic. You're getting notes out of each way of brewing it. So it's fun trying different ways.
Yeah, so maybe if we do the cupping thing, we could also do multiple different delivery methods as it were.
Yeah, I mean, in any good in our cafes, we offer a French press. We can offer a pour over. We will stop and take the time. It's going to cost you a little more money, but
sure.
And then we drip brew it, of course, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. It's just, it's the level. I feel like what I'm learning now, kind of like when I was learning about wine and things of that nature, it's like, it's you can still enjoy it at a very easy surface level, but if you want to dive deeper, there are all these extra processes that really just enrich the experience overall.
Oh, yeah.
That's the world we're living in now. We all want to be foodies. And I think, we talked about the transparency of the grow and the whole process. I think that the public at large is really getting to that point where we want to know where our food comes from. We want to know what kind of food we're eating, all of these kinds of fun things.
We want to make sure we're not giving money to the bandits.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. I want to be the bandit for once, Anna, this has been fascinating, and I really I know this has been a long time. We've been trying to set this up forever, so thank you so much for coming down and doing this.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Of course, yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
I love doing demos at Jungle Gyms. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the customers love it too, because today was fun. It was like you could smell the fresh coffee brewing in here, and people were like, oh, what are they doing? And we've got,
they're so open to trying and learning. It's the atmosphere where you come to because you want to learn about food and try different things. And I'm always amazed at how many people are willing to have a beer in one hand and a coffee in the other and try them both.
Why not? Yeah. I mean, that's it's December while we're recording this. And I thought this was a very funny day because people coming in were like, we had reindeer outside for a little demo, and then they walk in and we're roasting coffee and trying coffee, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
That's why you come to Jungle Gyms. You never know what you're going to say.
That is exactly why you come to Jungle Gyms. Yeah.
Well, and again, thank you so much. And I look forward to we'll do something fun here in the future.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for opening my eyes. I'm a light roast drinker now. Ever since this, I've been actually actively buying light roast coffee. And you know what? It's true. You really can taste a lot more nuance in the beverage. You know, those crisp, citrusy kind of notes, a little acidity. It's really great. I feel like I really kind of blew it by going dark roast. But, you know, as we learned from Greg in the previous week's episode, drink what you like. And we talk about that a little bit in this show, I know. But drink what you like. But also have your, be willing to try new things just in case, because maybe you don't know what you like yet. That's been the case for me. So on that, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you all had a great time. We've got some fun stuff coming up. We just worked on a piece with our seafood department and our new manager, Vasalia. We went through cutting salmon steaks, so you'll be able to check that out. That'll be on YouTube. We've got a Super Bowl episode where I teamed up with In the Curious Kitchen. MK of In the Curious Kitchen is really great. We met on Instagram, and she's actually one of the first products that I successfully brought into the store. So, hey, if you're listening to the show and you're like, man, I wish I could get into Jungle Gyms. Well, I can't promise you anything, but I can promise you this. If you give me a sample and I like it, I will, at the very least, pass that sample along onto the relevant manager, who will then make the ultimate decision. So keep that in mind. I'd love to help. I mean, truly. And if you have something great, awesome. Hey, no promises, but it's a step further than you are right now, right? Hey, what can I say? I'm a man of the people. Okay, on that, I got to go finish packing and doing laundry so I don't have to keep wearing flannel on the show. But I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for listening to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your kind words. You know, it's been a lot of fun for me recently. I had somebody in here yesterday. I'll just shout him out. Follow him on Instagram at Fat Ben's Bakery. He's a really cool independent baker here in town that does like a lot of custom work. And Ben was telling me a story about how one of his friends in New York listened to the show. And that's how he and I have now become friendly, and how I got to eat some of the best cookies I've ever had in my life. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben's friend in New York City. And thanks to all of you who have been supporting the show and sharing this with everybody. Look, it's been slow, steady growth, but I'm going to take growth over anything else. So I appreciate you all. It means a lot. Okay, I'm headed to Florida. Good luck with the snowstorm this week. I'm sorry I had to leave you. And on that, I'll see you out in the aisles. But this time I'm spelling aisles, I-S-L-E, because, you know, there's like tropics and Florida. Okay, you get the joke. See you next week.
The Jungle Gyms podcast is recorded in the WJJI studio inside Jungle Gyms International Market in Fairfield, Ohio. The Jungle Gyms podcast is produced and hosted by Mark Borison.